Sunday school teacher at Pleasant Grove Mall Church, where Pastor Joe Keys is the pastor. Our Sunday school lesson topic today is Countercultural Compassion, coming from Deuteronomy, the 24th chapter, verses 10 through 21. In our introduction, it tells us what countercultural compassion means in the context of God's requirements for justice. Countercultural is an adjective describing a subculture whose lifestyle or values reject or oppose the dominant values and behavior of society. Compassion is a sympathetic awareness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. The nation of Israel was called to be a peculiar people, living out values that were the opposite of those of the people living in Canaan. In other words, the national lifestyle was to be countercultural. Israel, as God's special people, had been chosen to model God's ways and not those of the polytheistic and inhumane nations they were soon to dispossess. God gave Israel a radically different set of principles and values to direct every area of their lives. One of these areas was respecting the rights and dignity of others, especially the marginalized. Deuteronomy 24, verses 8 through 22, details God's stipulations for directing fair and just treatment of the subpopulation after they entered and possessed the land of promise. In our first outline, lenders beware, Deuteronomy 24, 10 through 13. In this outline, the Israelites were told that they could make loans but were forbidden to enter the home of the borrower to collect the pledges for collateral. The lender had to remain outside and the borrower brought the pledge out to them. Normally, these pledges would be an article of clothing. For that reason, the lender was forbidden to keep the pledges overnight because the poor might need the clothing to protect them from the cold. This gesture from the Israelites showed compassion and love toward their neighbor and would prompt the marginalized to be grateful. God expected Israel then and believers today to respect the dignity of others at all times. We must remember to treat people the way we want to be treated. The only time we should look down on anyone is to help them up. Our second outline is workers' compensation and family preservation, Deuteronomy 24, 14 through 18. Israel's task was to model a different view of the value of human life than was held by the inhabitants of Canaan. Countercultural compassion shown here between the relationship of the employer and employees, especially poor and foreign workers. Employers were to pay the poor workers at the end of each workday, so they would have money to meet their daily needs. Moses cautioned the employers to obey this law. He reminded them of God hearing their cries when they were in bondage in Egypt. And as a result, he disciplined Pharaoh and delivered them out of bondage. He could and would do the same thing for the employers and employees then. If the employers did not treat the employees right and fair, God could discipline them as well. God expected the employers to treat the employees with dignity and respect. Our third and final outline, provision for the marginalized, Deuteronomy 24:14 through 21. In this section of the text, God outlined an action plan to implement his commitment to marginalized people. The Israelites were to demonstrate selflessness by giving to the needy. During the harvesting season, they were to leave some of their grain crops, olives, and grapes for the needy to glean. Leaving enough to provide for the needy was not a handout because they had to work to obtain these resources. It wasn't a handout, and it also maintained their sense of dignity. In our lesson today, it's telling us as believers, we all know that we live in an unjust world right now, but we as believers have to treat people just. Just because we live in this world, we're not of this world anymore. So that means that we have to treat people right. We have to live a life that's going to be pleasing to God. Although we live in an unjust world, we have to be just. So this lesson tells us to treat everybody right, especially when we see people that are in need. We see people that are less fortunate than we are. Don't look down on them. Don't talk about them. But we should always help them because we never know when the shoe is going to be on our foot. So never look down on anyone. Always be there for everyone and not just someone's. Thank you.